Thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I'm so excited. I know all the wonderful things you have been doing and work on, but I'm so excited for other people to hear about it and get inspired by that. Would you like to introduce yourself and we can then dive deeper into your work?
Absolutely. Thank you, Namvi. So my name is Beth Miller. I'm the executive director of the Creative Education Foundation. We're a creativity organization that was established in 1954 by Alex Osborne, who's known as the father of brainstorming. Alex was an ad executive in the 1940s who developed a methodology for helping his ad executives get more and more creative. And then he got really passionate about introducing that methodology to the wider world. So in 1954, he established our nonprofit. And ever since that time, for the last 71 years now, we've been training people in deliberate creativity, specifically in creative problem solving.
That's amazing. And it's so amazing that it's been like there for so many years and still like a lot of people don't acknowledge creativity in that much depth. And I'm sure we all like resonate with that idea. And before I dive deeper into knowing about what you work on into it, I would love to start with like asking you what is your first memory of like making something or feeling creative or just like even having that idea of like, oh, I did like a problem solving or imagination.
That's a great question. And instantly what pops to mind is I think I was in, I want to say first grade, and I created a book of poetry. I just got really, I started loving words and I loved how they rhymed. And I still remember I wrote out all these poems that I had made. They were like very silly kind of rhyming poems, but I was so proud of them. And I got yellow construction paper and I drew a big flower and I made a cover and a back and I like made my own book of poetry. And I just remember being so proud of it and feeling just feeling really creative and like I had made something, and that I was allowed to do it, and that people really supported it. So that's my first really strong memory of doing kind of a creative thing that sprung fully formed from my own mind, and I just brought it from beginning to end.
Wow, that is so beautiful, and that even that you remember that feeling so early on. I think that is so special about feeling this. And like I love that you have been like dedicated and being like a leader in creativity for so many years. When did you first realize that creativity was not just like a talent, but a discipline one could practice and like build on?
Absolutely. So that came, I would say that really formed more fully when I started getting involved with this organization 11 years ago. But prior to that, if I dig a bit deeper, there was a time in my life where my history is unusual. I failed out of college twice. I went back to school as an adult. I've had a lot of big challenges, life challenges in my life. And at one point where I was at a really big transition point, I was a professional nanny. So I was a nanny for a family and I was also a bartender. And I was pretty sure that that was going to be it, that I was never going to try college again. But I happened to sign up for a creativity course. And it was a course based on The Artist's Way by Julian Cameron. And so we followed the book and did morning pages, and it was held in a studio. And the woman who was facilitating this course, every day that we went in for the class, we'd have to do some kind of art project, based on something that we were surfacing in our lives. And I kept doing these like little tiny pictures, and I kept doing it. And like the fourth week, I pull out like a little tiny piece of something to work on. And she comes over and she took it away from me. And she said, "No, I want you to do something big." And she took out this butcher paper and unrolled like 10 feet of it and put it up on the wall, and she said, "Fill that." And I was like, I was so overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my God, that's so much space. I ended up making this underwater seascape with like a mixed, media collage with like glitter and all this stuff, like this big, like fish scene, underwater fish scene. And very soon after that, I finally submitted my application for the adult education program at Trinity College. And after I got this job, I reflected back on that experience and artistic creativity did for me, which is a little different than what we teach. But what that artistic creativity did, that low stakes poster that I made, helped break something through for me in my personal life, so I could do the big thing, which was submit my application to Trinity College to go back to school. I got in. I ended up graduating with honors. I wrote I won 5 awards for a paper I wrote that was later turned into a play. I joined the faculty 6 months after I graduated. So like that was like rocket fuel in my life. And when I look back on that, I realize how that one moment of creativity, when she snatched that little thing away from me and made me do a big thing, created a breakthrough in my life that ultimately changed the trajectory of my life.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. And also like this coming from like when you were adult, not something like which you were when you were like a child and you did not have
Right.
control over it. This was like something like you made decision and then you felt that you could do this. And even though it was like a small action, but it kind of changed the whole trajectory. And that's so
Yes.
like beautiful about the whole idea of creativity. And like we often like don't look at it and we all often focus on academics and like these grades and marks and instead of like
Yes.
these small acts of invitations which really kind of impacts your life. And I'm
That's
curious
right.
to know more about like this whole idea of transforming through creativity, through this idea of brainstorming deliberate
Mhm.
creativity. Like could you explain more about that and like how is it different from like people generally think about creativity?
Right. Excellent question. So what creativity does, or the study of deliberate, the practice of deliberate creativity, I will say, instead of the study of it, the practice of it invites you back into curiosity, which is something we're super, super good at as kids, and that we get trained out of us because we're always looking for the right answer. And curiosity is actually, it's very neutral, right? Curiosity is like, huh, I wonder what that's about. And there's no baggage, there's no emotional stuff, nobody's going to grade me on this. Curiosity is very, very pure, but also very elevated. And we lose it because it becomes unsafe to be curious. It becomes it or it feels unsafe to not know the right answer. You know, we get penalized for it with tests at work, all of the things. So we have to relearn it as adults. And what deliberate creativity does is it reintroduces you to your natural curiosity. And that curiosity isn't just about being open to new ideas. That's a big part of it, but it's also being open to new ideas in a neutral way. And that is really, really critical. And one of the key elements of creative problem solving that we teach during the ideation phase, or if we're diverging, is to defer judgment. There is a time to apply judgment and criteria, but deferring judgment, what that does is it helps you shed your preconceived notions, your preconceived limitations, so that you can just clear the decks of that and just engage with possibility thinking. It feels a little loose and unmoored and a little scary because we are very much an implementation driven society, results driven. We don't want to mess around with this. What's this soft, fluffy stuff? It doesn't mean anything. But if you can't clear the decks and really ask good questions, you can't come up with new ideas. You cannot. You will always be influenced by what has already been done or by the things that hold you back. So I think that's one of the most critical things about deliberate creativity is it helps you clear the decks and it helps you really access new thinking. The other thing I'll add to that is that deliberate creativity also helps you self-reflect in the ways that you're getting in your own way for progress. Again, preconceived notions, doubts, fears, etc. It helps you kind of see those things and gives you tools to not lose them because I think fear can serve a purpose, but helps you put them aside so that you can move forward. And then the next step after that is when you're able to be really self-reflective and adapt how you show up to challenges and situations, you cannot help but wonder about the person you're working with and being like, and offering them more grace and compassion. Because even if you're having trouble collaborating, if they're struggling with an idea, and if you know by self-reflection, like, oh, I struggle with this thing too because I have this fear or this trigger or whatever, you can't help but say, they're probably dealing with their own stuff that I don't even know about, and they're bringing it to this process. So, how might I work well with them and deepen my compassion? So, I think deliberate creativity does a few things, brings us back to curiosity, helps us self-reflect in a way that helps us evolve to be more true to ourselves, and it helps us deepen our compassion for other people who may show up in different ways to challenging situations.
That is so amazing. And like whole idea of like judgment and unlearning this behavior itself is so big. And like we often like underrate this idea of like how, oh, it's so easy for people. So many people I often hear say like, oh, I'm not creative. Like
Yes,
it's so like often. And I'm like, no, like everybody is creative in their own
everybody.
way. And it's just like about finding out like what it is like which makes you creative, right? And
Right.
like, and people often like have this understanding of like creativity is spontaneous, like it's not something
Mhm.
which is kind of you can build on. And I'm curious like how in your work have you seen like experiences in which like you balance like the structure and process, and like how the
Yeah.
structure and freedom work together in the model which you work with for creativity, and like have you had any like ground experiences of anecdotes which you could share more about?
Sure. Yeah. I would say that that's our biggest marketing challenge with what we do is that people are like, oh, I'm not creative. And, so creativity is, we've had so many people say, you should just change your name, change it to innovation. I'm like, no, I'm holding on to creativity. We're not changing our first name. But people do get tangled up with that word because it means a lot of different things. And what leaps to mind is artistic creativity. Am I a ballet, dancer? Am I a painter? Am I a writer? Certainly those things are creative. But creativity is something that we all have. If you are a human being who has gotten through the day, you have been creative at some point. It is natural, it is nascent, it is there for us to draw on. And if we learn to master it, it can be deliberate. So the thing that I love about creative problem solving, which is the process that we have created, and there's a lot of other processes that are also fantastic. But what deliberate creativity does is it helps you, what creative problem solving does is it helps you turn creativity into deliberate creativity. So it gives you control over the process and it helps you show up and uncover where you're strong within the process. So there are four stages in creative problem solving, and I won't go too deep because it could be a little mind numbing, but the four stages are clarify, ideate, develop, and implement. Clarifying, you're gathering data, you're like getting information, and people don't think, oh, data gathering, that's not creative. Absolutely critical to understand your landscape, understand your situation. Until you have a full understanding of what's happening, you can't possibly solve the right question. And I'll tell companies or groups that we work with, like if you keep solving a problem every year and keep ending up with the same problem at the end of the year, you didn't ask the right question, you're not solving the right problem, you didn't clarify enough. So gathering data is part of the creative process. Understanding your landscape, making connections, that's part of the creative process. The part of the creative process that people most recognize is brainstorming or ideating, and that's the sticking up the post-its and like, how about this? How about that? How about this? And that's great. Absolutely, it's critical to creative problem solving. But if you only do that, you never get to results. And so when you hear critiques of creative problem solving, they're like, man, brainstorming doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't by itself. You're not doing the whole process. All right. The next step is to develop. So after you've gathered data, after you've built on that data with ideation, then you get to develop. You've selected some of the best ideas, and now you're going to kick the tires, like really test those ideas. What makes us excited? What do we think we really can do within our criteria, budget limitations, staff limitations, et cetera. And then from there, when you feel good about that plan, you go to implementation. And implementation is who's going to do what by when and how are we going to measure it. So creative problem solving as a whole is a very explicit process, very explicit guardrails in which you can show your true creativity either alone or within a group. One of the common phrases you'll hear about creativity is to think outside the box. Most of our creativity happens inside of a box. And thinking outside, that's a nice sentiment, but unless you have unlimited resources and unlimited time, most people have to be creative within a box. And in many ways, a process like creative problem solving or design thinking or polarity management, those are boxes, right? They're giving you the arena in which to execute your creativity. It creates a safe space for the development of that creativity and allows you to focus on that creativity. So I would say that is kind of the unusual or unexpected maybe of what people think about creative problem solving or what creativity can be. It can be methodical, process based, and output driven. And that's really what we do.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and it's so like complex, and it's so interesting to like hear you talk about it because like it's so like creativity is so like overused in such like
Yeah.
easily without
Yeah.
even like going to this like depth of what it means. And I think that itself, like the way you explain the complexity of it, is so interesting to me. And I'm curious, like, because as you, I was like reading about your work, like your journey began in like teaching and like writing. Like, if there a moment in your life or like in your classrooms or any like with learners where
Mhm.
you like understood or saw firsthand like what creative thinking means to you and like means to the learner and that in that education spaces.
The first thing that leaps to mind for me, there's a few. I'll start with one when I was a writing professor. I remember I was teaching an essay that I had taught many times, yellow wallpaper, and a student in her essay had, and I don't remember what the different take was, but she wrote this thesis statement that was so fresh and new and I'd never ever heard it. And I still get chills. And it made me so excited that I emailed her right away. This is so, I've never heard this before. And that was an epiphany for me, like that how much other people's creativity or new perspectives could be really, really light me up. And like, that I didn't need to be like, no, this is the right answer. Like, I loved that somebody like challenged what I thought. Like, that was really invigorating. And that let me know that was like kind of my first experience of like how powerful other people's new perspectives could be in inspiring me and helping shake loose my thinking and just how much I loved that. Another experience I had was my very first year at our conference, the Creative Problem Solving Institute. I attended our Foundations in Creative Problem Solving class, which is the introduction to CPS. I wanted to like have that immersive experience. And there was a gentleman in the course with us and he was like a CFO at a big hospital. So he comes in the first day and he's in a suit, tie buttoned up, very like he's used to going to these conferences where we do the conference and he's very like everything about him was kind of formal, a little stiff. And then and that's just kind of it's which is fine. You be you. And but as we got into the content, like the next day he came and he wasn't wearing a tie. And then the third day he came and he wasn't wearing his jacket. And the last day he's wearing shorts and a t-shirt, you know? And it just cracked me up because I felt like I saw over the course of the week the way that that process literally loosened him up and helped him just kind of get comfortable with the group and in his skin and in the process. And it had a very visual kind of representation in how he was presenting himself. And it cracked me up. And of course, there were the way he was talking in the class and everything. It also shifted, and you could just kind of see this kind of formality and rigidity melt away in real time, and him get comfortable sharing his ideas. And that was just so powerful. And all I could think is like, okay, this CFO is going to take that visceral experience that he had back to his major hospital with his team and he's probably going to start hearing their ideas differently and he's probably going to be listening differently and he's probably going to be engaging differently. And that what struck me about that is how quickly this process could make really big changes for people and how they show up and how they interact and how transformative creativity can be immediately.
Yeah, which is so beautiful. And also this attention to detail as an idea, which we
Yeah.
often, and this whole idea of listening is
Hmm.
so, so crucial. And I think that's when we know, like, as you were saying about your student, like the person's like writing kind of inspired you so much and like challenged you. And then you kind of wanted to get back and learn more. And I think that comes by listening or like reading or just like paying attention. And I think that is
Hmm.
such a key to be like any leader or any like human. And I'm curious, like, how in your like experience have you seen like the way like creativity has changed people in their communication or in their way of collaborating or building relationships in like organizations or like education setups.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I have one anecdote about there was a someone who came and trained with us for creative problem solving, and he worked at a manufacturing company. So maybe not someplace you would necessarily think of for creativity. So this was a subsidiary of Hobart, which is a big manufacturing company. They had like a shop floor, so lots of men and women on the shop floor turning wrenches, building stuff, all of that. He got permission from his C-suite to start doing creative problem solving training with the mechanics, with the shop floor workers. and broke them into different teams at regular intervals. I think it was every couple of weeks on Fridays. They would gather in their groups and do brainstorming sessions, do creative problem solving sessions on various problems or challenges that came up. And so the mechanics would bring like, hey, we're struggling with, our timing for this and that. And, okay, what might be all the ways we can solve for that? And things like putting wheels on the bottom of certain tool chests and moving them to different areas or rearranging the machinery or, an array of different really physical activities. And then what they would do is whenever an idea that came from one of the groups was implemented, if one of their ideas was implemented and was successful, they had this award. It was a golden fist. It was like just a cheap plastic golden fist award. And he told me a story about how one of the guys won the golden fist, and he called his wife. He's like, "I got the golden fist." It didn't mean anything. It wasn't money. But it was like everyone celebrated everyone's good ideas. It was to the collective good. So in real results, what happened was because the C-suite and managers listened to their mechanics, the mechanics created innovations that saved the company 600,000 continuous strength movements in 1 year. So that's literally the number of times they're turning a wrench or physically using their body in some way to build something that goes directly to workplace safety, health, fatigue, all of that. So it made it a safer workplace. They also saved the company $1.4 million in 1 year because of the adjustments they made, all from creative problem solving, all from investing literally the folks on the shop floor with those skills, not top down, not the C-suite saying, oh, we're going to do this process and going on a leadership retreat, the people that are actually in it. And so those kinds of results are possible with creative problem solving. And that's part of what I love about it is it values experience over expertise. So that means anybody sitting at the table, and the more diverse the people at the table, the better, because they couldn't have known that this machine would work better next to the other machine unless they worked those machines. So you need to have that machinist in that meeting if they're going to and get their input. If you're going to make a solution that is going to make your workplace safer, more efficient, and more profitable. And that's what happened with CPS in that company.
That is so great. That is like, wow, that's like big numbers. And I'm so
Yeah.
amazed that like these smallest like things which you think from the outside is so like minute can make such like huge differences.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. Like I'm also curious because I'm sure like this, I mean, this work is difficult, like to even like introduce this idea. What were
Yeah.
the kind of challenges have you faced in introducing these ideas and like or taking into rooms which people like don't like understand or like really believe in this
Mhm.
idea?
Yeah, I was just talking about that yesterday with one of our partners. So we have a partner who teaches has play strategies, right? And so how do you go to a company or even get them to look at you or pay attention when your byline is creativity or play? It seems like a nice to have, not a need to have, and it's incredibly challenging to try to get that message across and stay true to what it is we do. So I don't have the answer for that. If I did, we'd have more people at the conference. But I think the reason it's difficult is because again, we're an outcome-based society. We get extra help for stuff when we're in crisis, not before we're in crisis. And I think those two things, and the idea of soft skills not being important, I think those things kind of coalesce to work against us. If you get creative problem solving training, it's preventative. So that company that saved all that money, they didn't bring CPS in because they were in trouble. They brought things in, they weren't in crisis. They just wanted to do better. So creative problem solving works, these strategies work, but they're very invisible because you're not applying them during a crisis. You're just integrating them into how you work. And if you don't measure the results, $1.4 million, $600,000, people don't think it's valuable. They just think, oh, they loved the golden fist. That's nice. It doesn't feel critical, but collectively, that whole story is really important. The other thing that happened with that company is the company got closer. They started doing charitable giving, they started having family picnics. It changed the whole culture. But that kind of soft stuff is like, oh, that's nice to have, but I really just need to get the work done. So finding ways to talk about what we do, because people perk up when they hear $1.4 million, they perk up when they hear other like quantitative data.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy to get that. If people aren't measuring it as they go, they just know, oh, at the end we had a greater workplace. There's one school in Florida that sends teachers to different teachers to our Florida Creativity Conference every year. And I buttonholed one of them last year. I'm like, you all keep coming year after year. Why do you keep coming? And she said, well, our principal said, I don't know what they're teaching you there, but you guys just come back really happy. So I'm going to keep sending teachers. So, like, his teachers coming back happy was good enough for him. And the teachers love it. So, but I think that's part of it. I think we have, soft skills are really undervalued. I like to say soft skills are hard work because they really are, and that's where workplaces are struggling right now. Workplaces struggle with communication. They struggle with cross-generational misunderstanding, misalignment. They struggle. It's all soft skills that's getting in the way of the work. So if you don't have people that are really good at running a good meeting, making people feel included, facilitating difficult conversations, listening to all people on the team, like those are soft skills. That is not easy. That's all the stuff people don't want to do because it's so hard. So we've shifted to starting to call them power skills, which is another kind of gimmicky word, but whatever. We're just trying to like get people to start thinking that creativity skills, they're the things that are going to make you a better leader because they make you self-reflective, they let you be vulnerable, they let you lead in a way that is informed by your team. They help you zero in on critical issues or things before they become a critical issue so you can address it. Those are soft skills. They are absolutely critical for the running of any kind of business. And the other piece, and I'll bring it back to what we talked about before, if you're going to have an innovative workforce, they have to have room to be curious and creative. So the benefit of playing, the benefit of exploring curiosity, of going through these low stakes experiences in our workshops, break through to break through the breakthroughs. So it was a low stakes experience for me to do that big poster in the creativity class, but it helped me shift my thinking like, oh, I can do big things. And I went back to college and changed my life. The same thing happens if we're in a workshop with creative problem solving and we ask people, okay, you're going to do a portrait with your eyes closed of your partner next to you. And at first they're like, what? That's stupid. That's ridiculous. I can't possibly succeed at that. And then they're like, oh, wait, of course I'm going to fail at this. So it doesn't matter. So they do these crazy portraits and then they talk about them. And it's hilarious and silly. But what it is that's low stakes practice of stepping into ambiguity. Oh my God, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And doing it anyway and having a fun result. That practice allows them to go to a high stakes situation at work and step into ambiguity, take a risk, and create innovation. So that's what we're up against. I know it works, but we have a lot of cultural baggage to kind of work through for people to hear what it is we do.
Oh my God, that is so like the way you put it is so beautiful, and I'm so like inspired by hearing, just like hearing this like challenges and how you kind of put it all together, and like how like these tiny like activity sort of things which other
Yep.
people would think, oh, they're just doing like an art activity, or they're just doing like a team building, or just like just like an
Hmm.
activity is
Yep.
actually like such a long lasting impact. And you're right. I think this whole idea of data, we live in such a data driven society that everybody wants number. They don't care
Yep.
about anything else, and that's so like challenging, but at the same time obviously like motivating that we keep doing this work because we believe in this work. And I think like people like you have been like working so hard to kind of get people understand is so like special. And just like going towards like the end of this conversation, I would love to know like what do you feel like are the small mindset shifts, like mindset shifts with like which
Mm.
educators or people or leaders or parents can take in their life to like center creativity, if you have to like name some small mindset shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a lot of great little tools that people can use that are part of our process. I'd say the most simple one is using invitational stems. So, and what those are basically sentence starters to kind of provoke possibility thinking. I invite people just to complete I wish. I wish what? And write something bold and audacious. I wish I could work from home doing something I love. I wish I could take a year off and get paid to write my cookbook, whatever. Like write your wish statement. Start start breaking that will start breaking down the barriers. It will feel, don't listen to, oh, it's impossible, that can never happen, I can't afford it. Don't listen to it. Just write down the I wish statements. That's the first step in getting into creative problem solving is to kind of break down the barriers and just really zero in on what you wish for. The other tool I would recommend is changing your language when addressing a challenge. So a lot of times when we're facing a challenge at work or at home, we will say to our spouse or our colleague, we should do XYZ. We should do this and that. We should all over ourselves. Should is a hard word. Should doesn't involve problem solving. It'll automatically create opposition because you're going to say, I think we should do this. And someone's going to, well, I think we should do that. And sometimes people say things and they're actually saying the same thing, but they're saying it a different way. And they still have conflict because they don't realize they're saying the same thing. And that word should is a problem. I suggest that people change that language. So one of our other invitational stems is how might we? And might is incredibly, it's based in neuroscience, the use of the word might. It's a possibility word. It's not like we should. There's not judgment embedded in it. It's like this is one of the things we might do. And that structure itself, in what ways might we or how might we? The we, it invites people into solution making. So you go from butting heads to being on the same side of the desk looking at the problem together. So how might we solve this problem? What might be all the ways we could solve this challenge? How might we do this together? So that just using that language when addressing challenges can make profound shifts in the quality of the conversations that you have with others and in generating new ideas to solve pernicious problems.
Wow, so well put together. I think this whole idea of like also A, the language, and the B, this idea of like breaking away from this fear and judgment is so
Yes.
important to even start being creative. And I think how like just kind of acknowledging like all your wild, crazy ideas are acknowledged, are like you need to put it out, you need to say it out in order to have a discussion about it. It's not like good or bad, it's all about like having a discussion or
That's
having
right.
this openness about creativity, which is so like important and interesting to me. Awesome. And I think like towards the end, like I would love to
Yeah.
know if you have to tell like a superpower to creativity, or what does creativity has, like what superpower does it have, what would you say?
Hmm. I think creativity's superpower is giving people the pause, that moment of pause to listen and wonder and just kind of be quiet before getting into the solution. I think that the gift of pausing and reflecting is part of the superpower of creativity. I think creativity helps people be their best selves, their happiest selves, their most growth mindset, and puts them in their most mindset reality. And I think it's exactly what the world needs right now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.